This is Phil Burnell. He's also known as Darkside Phil or DSP, and if you're watching this, you probably already know who he is. If you don't, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail because we'll be here all day, but basically,
I myself am a former pro fighting game player
who's made a living as a Let's Player for over a decade on YouTube and now also streams gameplay on Twitch. If you're interested, a YouTuber called Frederick Knudsen did a great video on him. It's part of his Down the Rabbit Hole series, which I'll link here somewhere. And I could also really recommend searching YouTube for any of the This Is How You Don't Play compilations, as these are what really made DSP famous or infamous online. But that's not what we're here for today. Instead, I'm going to look at something Phil said during one of his pre-stream sessions, specifically Monday, December the 3rd, 2018. I know it's over a month old. I wanted to do this sooner, but I've had a presentation and a report to do for university before Christmas, so it's had to wait. And obviously I don't want to spend my Christmas holidays dealing with DSP. I would rather do Christmas things with family and friends.
because it's Christmas!
Anyway, before each video game stream, Phil has a pre-stream where he talks and rambles and answers questions his viewers send him, and one of the viewers asks,
Cam, not the comedy man, did a 100-bit cheer. He says, Phil, I know you don't like Fortnite, that's cool, but do you agree with Ninja when he calls out the parents of these kids who become addicted to Fortnite?
Now, it may be fair to criticise Ninja's opinions too. However, since DSP admits he has no idea what Ninja said, he dismisses that, and instead offers his own opinions.
I have no idea what Ninja said, so I cannot tell you anything if I agree with his perspective or not. I can tell you my perspective.
And as such, I too will not concern myself with what Ninja said, and instead address Phil's opinions. First things first, as I've said in my previous video about video game addiction, which you can watch here, cheap plug, any behaviour can be addictive as long as there's a mental reward associated with it, and video games are rife with manipulative mechanics to keep players playing. It's also important to draw a distinction between the physical and psychological aspects of addiction. There is a difference between addiction and dependence, and understanding this difference is essential when it comes to discussing behavioural addictions such as gaming, gambling, shopping, and so on. With that in mind, let's see what DSP thinks about kids being addicted to the video game Fortnite.
If your kid's addicted to Fortnite, it is a failure of the parent.
Okay, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is assuming that parents know as much about technology as their kids. What you're looking at now is a modded version of Doom my brother and I played when we were younger, which swapped out the sprites for Simpsons characters. We were banned from playing Doom on our mum's orders, but Dad let us play this version. He didn't know how to load the original WAD and play Doom in all its demonic glory, but we knew, and we did so when we knew he wouldn't be looking. Granted, this is anecdotal evidence from 20 odd years ago, but googling the words parents, credit card, video games will furnish you with plenty of examples of parents confessing they had no idea what their children were up to when they were buying gems, V-Bucks or FUT coins. The thing is, parents are humans who are sometimes distracted by other life demands, and no parent watches their child 100% of the time or knows absolutely everything about the media and technology their children are using.
Alright, it's true. Because I was reading an article the other day saying, oh, some kids play Fortnite up to 12 hours a day. I was like, what the fuck? Let me give you an idea of what my life was like when I was a kid, okay?
DSP is 36 and was 7 years old when the first commercial ISP launched in America. When he was a kid, this is what the internet was like.
17 stories up in his fashionable North Beach apartment, Richard Halloran is calling a local number that will connect him with a computer in Columbus, Ohio. Meanwhile, across town, in this less than fashionable cubbyhole at the San Francisco Examiner, these editors are programming today's copy of the paper into that same Ohio computer. When the telephone connection between these two terminals is made, the newest form of electronic journalism lights up Mr. Halloran's television with just about everything the Examiner prints in its regular edition. That is, with the exception of pictures, ads, and the comics. 8 newspapers around the country are currently in the computer network. Both the Examiner and Chronicle began service within the last 2 weeks and printed full-page ads about it. Of the estimated 2,000 to 3,000 home computer owners in the Bay Area, the Chronicle reports over 500 have responded by sending back coupons.
With this system, we have the option not only of seeing the newspaper on the screen, but also optionally we can copy it. So anything we're interested in, we could go back in again and copy it onto paper and save it, which I think is the future.
Engineers now predict the day will come when we get all our newspapers and magazines by home computer, but that's a few years off. So for the moment at least, this fellow isn't worried about being out of a job.
Whereas today, kids literally carry the internet with them in their pockets, as do most of us. So before we learn of a prepubescent Phil's daily routine, remember that the world has changed drastically in the 30 years since the American public was first able to dial up.
Woke up in the morning early. I was tired as fuck. Got up, washed up, went downstairs. My mom made me breakfast, which was very nice because a lot of kids don't have parents at home to make them breakfast anymore in the mornings. And then I was driven to school, where I stood in the schoolyard, froze my nuts off for about 25 minutes until they let us into the school. I was in school from about, I want to say around 8 a.m. till probably about 2, 3 p.m. My mom would come pick me up after school, or I would take the bus home, depending on, how old I was. I would come home from school. I would immediately get to watch about, I would say, roughly an hour of television. I was allowed, as an instant relaxation, to watch about an hour of television when I got home from school. Then it was dinner time. I'd have dinner with my family. Sometimes my dad would be home, sometimes he didn't, because sometimes he worked different shifts. Then immediately after dinner, brush the teeth, time for homework. Doing your homework for about 1 to 2 hours a night. At that point, it's probably already almost 8 p.m., in which case I would probably either do a little bit of video gaming, or I would watch some stuff, primetime television with my parents. I remember watching famous comedies like TGIF. They used to have these blocks of comedies and stuff that I would watch. Maybe an hour or two of television with my parents, and then I would go to sleep. And that was my life when I was a kid, okay? During the summertime, of course, there was much more free time. And during the summertime, I would do things like go out and play with friends, go to the video arcade and play video games, and the like. And yes, I would spend a lot of time maybe at home playing console games as well.
As enlightening as that was, it certainly wasn't my routine when I was growing up. Probably wasn't yours either. Phil appears to have forgotten that other people aren't him, and would consequently have had different lives, different routines, and different ways of doing things. Environmental influences play a huge part in the development of addictions, so while DSP might only have wandered down to the arcades during weekends, or summer, nowadays all you need to do is unlock your phone and open up the App Store.
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
And you'll be able to find something to play in a matter of minutes.
Where in the holy hell a child has 12 fucking hours to play Fortnite during a day? I have no idea. Like, something's gone wrong here. Something is gone amiss.
This one example appears to be the main sticking point for DSP, and you'll notice he's maddeningly vague about the exact article he read.
I was reading an article the other day.
But we can still plug child playing Fortnite for 12 hours a day into Google and see what comes up. The child in question appears to be Carson Vittany from Michigan, whose teachers have complained about him falling asleep in class, which DSP doesn't seem to realise indicates that a significant chunk of that 12 hours a day he can't account for seems to be during the night. Yet the thought of staying up all night playing games didn't occur to him because DSP keeps referring to Carson as a child, which is a bit disingenuous as it implies someone young and under significant parental control, whereas Carson is 17.
He's become a teenager.
Does this child even go to school?
Yes. His teachers have complained about him falling asleep in class. This is mentioned in basically every article I could find about Carson.
Like, where is this happening?
It's happening in Michigan.
That you're telling me there are these teens and preteens playing Fortnite for 12 hours a day.
No, Carson is an extreme outlier, and his playtime is not representative of the average playtime of the rest of the Fortnite community. A recent survey of 1,000 US Fortnite players found that 7.7% of them played for more than 21 hours each week. There's nobody other than Carson that I could find that played 12 hours or more a day.
Like, how is there enough time in the fucking day if they're actually doing what they're obligated to do?
But he's not doing what he's obligated to do. His grades are suffering because he's sleeping through class. That's kind of sort of basically exactly what addiction does to you. It makes you neglect your other life commitments in favour of doing whatever it is you're addicted to, be that drugs, gambling, or playing battle royale games. He is an addict, and this is not something that's the fault of his parents.
Like, I'm just lost how this is even possible, alright? Now, the bottom line is, this is the true, reality of the situation is that, sadly, ladies and gentlemen, we have many children in 2018 whose parents are irresponsible. You know, they wanted to do the deed, but then when they had the kid, they didn't want to actually have the responsibility of being a parent. So instead of actually taking on that responsibility and doing their job parenting, they throw the kid in front of a device and say, here, occupy yourself with this while I go have my own life, right?
Huh?
There are so many things wrong with this that I don't know where to start. No, that's a lie. I know exactly where to start, and it's by saying, fuck you, Phil.
Fuck you!
You, an only child with the privilege and good fortune to be raised by 2 parents, sit on your childless arse for 7 hours a day playing video games in your gated community in the bliss of your ignorance of the actual realities of raising children, and you have the gall to utter the words, "the true reality of the situation," before writing off all those parents who are struggling to cope with raising kids in a world that's increasingly online as technology outpaces them as irresponsible. I call bullshit on you only playing for an hour a day once you've done your homework and eaten your tea. I put good money on you spending as many hours as you could in the arcade pumping quarters given to you by your parents into the Street Fighter 2 cabinet and bitching about the buttons not working. Why was it okay for your parents to sit you in front of the TV while they did their own thing, but not parents nowadays? Do you really think that if your parents had wireless internet, smartphones and modern consoles and computers available to them, that you wouldn't be desperate to play them and they wouldn't have allowed you to play it while they did their own things? Do you honestly think that you who flipped out about not getting a Wolverine figure for your birthday,
I told you to buy the figure. Why don't you listen to me?
would be able to say, "Yes, mother, you are right. I have been spending too long playing this video game. I shall turn it off and get my homework done."
So, I'm not surprised to hear that kids are playing Fortnite so much it's become this viral fucking fad, okay? I'm not fucking surprised to hear about this at all, alright? But that being said, you know, it is the parent's job to make sure that a kid has a enriched and fulfilled and variety of life.
One of the most significant factors in the development of addictive behaviours is environmental cues, and after parents, the most significant influence on a child's behaviour is other children. Fortnite now has over 200 million registered players, with 78.3 million logging in every month. It is, as you put it, a viral fad. Do you really think that children are going to be able to detach themselves from something most of their friends are also obsessed with? You've played most of the Pokemon games.
It just seems to me like people are fucking lazy and don't want to come out to the streams.
You must remember how huge that was when it first rolled around. From Beanie Babies and Tickle Me Elmo to Pogs and Tamagotchi, our generation was not immune to being swept up in the latest craze during our adolescence, and our parents suffered the onslaught of merchandise and toys, and their wallets took a battering as our pestering was relentless. The only difference being, we were not as online. The technology available to us was not as powerful to enable almost constant connection to other people. We had to gather in groups to throw slammers at stacks of Pogs and swap cards, but had the ability to play with our friends through a smartphone or console being available to us, you could bet your Twitch stream earnings that we would have taken it, because the same psychological forces are at play here. Loss aversion, in-grouping, and subcultural identities, the power of marketing, all of it remains constant through technological advances, and all of it contributes towards the development and reinforcement of addictive behaviours.
The kid can't do that. The kid doesn't know any better. The parent has to guide the child. And so, if a kid is addicted to a fucking video game, yeah, it's the parent's fault. They should have been supervising what their kid was doing and making sure that there's a variety of healthy activities that child was doing so that they didn't become fucking addicted to something.
I've mentioned Doom previously, but for me the game that consumed my teenage years was Final Fantasy VII, and there's no hyperbole here. I was obsessed with this game for literal years. For around 15 to 19 I played the ever-loving shit out of Square's seminal RPG in literally the same manner as Carson Vittany. I would stay up all night playing it, switching off the TV and pretending to be asleep when my parents opened my bedroom door to check I'd turned it off like I said I would, and switching it back on when they'd gone. "Dad, just give me 2 minutes while I look for a save point. I'm really close to one." And that gets me 20 minutes. My schoolwork suffered, my grades dropped, I daydreamed my way through lessons and planned out party formations and materia arrangements in my head because all I could think about was getting back home and switching the PlayStation back on. I went through 3 copies of the game and even bought a Game Shark card so that I could really break the game open and mess around with it, only moving on when I had done everything I could with it. More than 10 years later, when the game was released on Steam, I did it all again, binging my way through the game over the course of a week and doing everything there was to do once more. I was absolutely addicted to that game. My parents might have had an inkling, but they had no real idea of how obsessed I was with it. And even if they did, there was bugger all they could have done about it. They could have snapped the discs and taken away the console, and in response I'd have gone round to a friend's house to play it there. Even during school time, I'd probably have nicked off school. And though there is little difference between how I was with Final Fantasy VII and how Carson is with Fortnite, there are a few key differences that are important to recognise, apart from the immediately obvious technological and graphical differences. First, Final Fantasy VII is finite. It has a set amount of content and a definitive endpoint. Fortnite does not. There is more replayability to Fortnite as no 2 matches are the same. Second, Final Fantasy VII is a single-player experience, and while Fortnite has a solo mode, it is primarily designed as an online multiplayer game, and thus a stronger, more immediate social influence than having to wait until school the next day to tell your mates how badly Emerald Weapon wrecked your shit. Third, Final Fantasy VII had no loot boxes, purchasable virtual currencies, or any of the more modern manipulative mechanical methods by which players are ensnared and encouraged to open their wallets and keep playing. These are key differences, as they contribute towards modern games being more addictive to players, and when coupled with the natural adolescent inclination to disobey a parent's orders where possible, can be powerful reinforcers of addictive behaviours.
It's very simple. You shouldn't let your kid just do whatever the fuck they want so you can go do whatever the fuck you want. But the second that kid was born, it was your responsibility to raise that human. And that's your fault for having the kid. You know, you shouldn't have had the kid if you didn't want to take on the responsibility of being the responsible parent. And this is the reality of 2018, is that we have too many people who are basically kids having kids, rather than people saying, okay, time to fucking actually, you know, make my life a serious life now, and now I have to fucking actually have a kid, you know.
It's really not. It's really not. If parents didn't have other demands on their time, other responsibilities to fulfill, then babysitters would not be a thing. No single parent, or even two parents, ever dedicates their entire lives to watching their children. It's simply not possible. Did you ever stay over at a cousin's house, DSP? Did you ever have a sleepover at a friend's place? Ever stayed with your grandparents for a few days while your parents went on holiday? Were you ever babysat? It takes a village to raise a child, Phil. Parents need help from other people at times. They need breaks to rest and recover and address other commitments and needs. Also, people are waiting longer to have children, and though the average age of first-time mothers varies across the United States, between 1980 and 2016, there's a significant drop in the number of first-time mothers under 25 and an increase in those 26 and over. In England, the average age of first-time mothers in 2016 was 28.8 years, and the number of women over 40 giving birth is higher than the number of women under 20. DSP is flat out wrong. The literal opposite of his claims is what's happening.
Because why do you think you hear so many stories about people losing their minds and doing crazy shit? Probably because they didn't have a good raising. You know, and I hate to say that. I sound like an old fart. I know I do. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of the issues that come with mental health, that come with just all kinds of things, is because of the parent did not raise that child. And the child basically was raising themselves on the internet. Okay? You can't do that.
This is so reductionist and wrong that I'm not even going to bother, other than to say that Phil knows nothing about what factors can affect an individual's mental health, because if he knew anything, he would know that you can't generalise to that extent. Honestly, I'm legitimately disgusted by him at this point. What a fucking charlatan.
So all that being said, I have to agree. If a kid is addicted to fucking Fortnite or any other video game or anything like that, it's the parent's fault. Alright? At the very same time, you know, I have no idea what Ninja said, so I'm not going to say I agree or disagree with him, but you have to understand.
At this point, it's basically repetition, which is essentially Phil's modus operandi. Make a statement, elaborate unnecessarily, and repeat. He does it with every question he's asked, making his answers needlessly long and soporific, so that when it comes time to repeat his statement, his audience is mentally fatigued enough to just accept it, regardless of whether it's accurate or correct. He then goes off on a rant, blaming people like Ninja.
That it has been the viral popularity of personalities like Ninja
And PewDiePie.
And, you know, yes, I am kind of talking about PewDiePie and those other people.
For making the game viral and causing people to become addicted to it.
That have led to this addiction.
As well as lowering the tone of websites like YouTube and Twitch.
Forget the fact that that is degrading things like Twitch, things like YouTube. Alright? It does. It degrades it down to a garbage level.
Again, reducing a complex issue to a generalised and incorrect cause. Now, understand that my position is not to absolve parents of responsibility here. It is important for parents to know and understand what their kids are doing, but it's unreasonable to expect them to be constantly present and monitoring their kids at all times, and there are influences other than them that have an impact on a child's behaviour. To do what DSP does, painting with broad strokes and isolating one aspect above all others, is foolish and wrong, just like DSP himself. Right, so post-edit conclusion, where should I start? Addiction. It's not always a straightforward problem, and this is especially true when you're considering behavioural addictions like gambling, gaming, so on. They require a greater understanding of the individual and their social environment. I also didn't mention any genetic factors. It's mostly because I assumed there were none. Couldn't really find anything about his mum or his family history, so, you know. There are also factors which can contribute towards addiction problems, and so they often need to be considered. I didn't think they applied here. I could have also gone into a bit more detail about how addictive behaviours affect the structure of the brain, but I felt I'd already covered that in my previous video. There's another cheap plug. It's here if you're interested. With regards to DSP, well, he knows nothing about addiction, and his attitudes towards mental health are legitimately disgusting, as is his attitude towards young parents. Again, this is an issue about which he is completely wrong. I'm not sure what else there is to say. Wanted to do a video about DSP for a while, but I've never really known how I'd approach it, you know, and then he went off on that rant about addiction, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. There's probably loads of other things like this that you could look at from a psychological perspective, but that's the problem with being so prolific. You end up leaving a lot of shit for others to wade through, and it's bound to be shit when that's all you're full of.